All good? Okay, thanks, Yoko. Well, hello, folks. Good afternoon, and welcome to our latest session of the Center for Tropical, Environmental, and Sustainability Sciences weekly seminar program, and that's also known as TESS, by the way, TESS. So we're really happy to have this kind of a forum here today, and really important to be thinking about for young people and individuals thinking about their careers, the things that they're going to be able to do in the future. I don't know if you've heard this, but JCU has the top record of any Australian university in terms of putting people into employment in the area that they train. So that's a really important statistic that universities like to track, and we're number one in that one so far. So that's really good for us, good for everybody. I'm being reminded that I need to say, you changed, okay, that's fine, yeah. We have our annual retreat, the TESS's annual retreat, which is held at a resort north of Cairns. It's a fantastic thing to do. If you haven't signed up already, please do so. Yoko, or just talk to Yoko for a second. She'll make sure you're all sorted out. All costs are covered, transportation, food, accommodation, everything. We do the whole thing, and everybody always has a really good time at the TESS retreat. Oh, we drink a little bit of alcohol too. And everybody always has a wonderful time at the TESS retreat. Anyway, without further ado, I'll turn things over to the organizer here. And again, we're just delighted to have you guys here today. So thanks a lot.
Cool. Welcome all. Thank you all for coming. My name is Garrett. I'm from the Nature and Adventure Collective. So I'm the president of the club, and this is an event that we've organized with the kind assistance of the TESS team. So I thank them for that. Today's about showcasing all the opportunities that are available to you and to everyone in the environmental field, particularly those in ways that aren't sort of that typical, greenie sort of thing, not field work, not being in a lab necessarily, but rather how law or medicine or business and just general sustainability can all tie into your careers of people, anything like that. So we've invited four leaders in their field along tonight to share their career, how they got there, what inspired them to choose the path they did, and to share advice and that kind of thing. So the way tonight will run, I'll invite them up firstly to give a bit of a presentation on those things I just mentioned. Then I will ask them a few questions each, and then we'll open up to the floor to ask them questions if you have any. We also have catering coming towards the end, so do stick around for that as well. And you're all, as always, welcome to mingle and network, that kind of thing. So without further ado, I'll invite Naeem up. Yeah, so Naeem's a solicitor with the Environmental Defender's Office, and I'll just let him introduce himself further. So away you go.
Thank you, Garrett. Apologise, I didn't prepare any visual aids for my presentation, so you're just going to have to make do with the lovely sound of my voice. I'm still very early in my career, so I have sort of cringed a little when you said a leader in the space, but I'll embrace it and go with it. I guess I'll start by just saying I'm a local, not quite Cairns local, but I grew up in Townsville. And JCU was the obvious choice of university because that's where my support systems were, where my friends, my family were, and that thought of going off to Brisbane or Canberra or Sydney was a little daunting for myself. And so I found regional university really great. And I'm sure a few of you here can probably reflect on that experience too. But in terms of my choice of study and my career projections in the future, when I was sort of entering this university space, deciding what I wanted to do with myself, it was more about what I was just interested in. I didn't really have grand aspirations during first or second year of university, but I did have a bit of enlightenment in third year university, where I made the decision and that I was very quite sure that I was never, ever, ever going to practice law. I wasn't finding the idea of being in court and even not in court, contract law, going over tiny little details of things. Very interesting. In my profile that was up earlier in the social media and whatnot, I did take an arts law degree, and I really liked my arts major, which was sociology. And that was all about how systems and society works. And I really found it interesting how our laws, our institutions track individual choices and individual futures, but also community choices and community futures. So I thought, that's something I'm really interested in. That's something I want to do. I never want to be a lawyer. I'm going to start looking at working in the public space, looking at policy work, doing that sort of thing. And that's where I set my goal. Come 4th year, 5th year, started doing the work experience programs through JCU, a semester abroad. So I did a little work working for the Australian Chamber of Commerce in Beijing. That was a great experience, but also solidified my idea that I don't want to go into the business space. I didn't want to go into trade or that kind of thing, because I just found it really, really boring. So returning home, getting back into it, one of the things that really helped me, or shaped me actually in university, was a university job I did, which was outreach work with high school students. It wasn't about locking kids into tertiary pathways, but it was about discussing options that were available to regional or remote kids. We went out to Cloncurry, Mount Isa, Mossman, and I really, really enjoyed working with those kids out in those communities, and also with our local community in Townsville and Cairns. And so I thought, what can I do with my community? How can I shape my law degree? And it was still pointing towards doing policy work, hoping I could make those sort of high-level changes, because a lot of my studies have been looking at high-level systems, which our legal system really is. So I graduated and went, all right, apply for all those APS job programs, graduate, horrible experience really. But I was really set on a particular departments to do. And I didn't get any of those jobs. So I was kicking around for a year going, what do I do till the next recruitment round? And I thought, well, I got my law degree. I might as well do my admissions and be a solicitor and bump up the resume that way. And I sort of came to a realization that because I really like doing community work and contributing to the community, the one thing I had at the time, like as a student, before I sort of started full-time work and etc., was time. Something I just had an excess of time. And so it was a perfect opportunity for me to be volunteering. So I was looking at, well, what can I do? Bump my resume up, do some volunteering work. And I found these community legal centres. So we have, legal aid, Townsville, it's Council for Community Law, and Cairns, it's Cairns Community Legal Centre, where legally trained people can volunteer their time, some people are employed, to provide free legal advice to the community. And as a requirement to being a solicitor, you have to do a certain amount of hours before you can, as supervised, like a supervised traineeship. And so I went, well, great, I'll volunteer for one of them. And little EDO showed up in Cairns. And I went, cool, I'll move up to Cairns. I'll do 2 months volunteering, and then I'll go off and kickstart my career. And I loved it. So my passion for career, while we're looking at how to get environmental jobs, my career wasn't, like, I didn't have a big passion for environment at that time. I found that a little bit later on. But what I did have a passion for was people. And there's one thing people are really passionate about, and I found particularly up here, is their environment. People really care about the place they live in. And I found that very rewarding to be able to help people protect their place, their own little slice of paradise, whether it's the rainforest, whether it's the reef, whether it's just that one really nice tree in the park. And so that's how I channeled it. And I was sort of in the right place, right time. There happened to be a grant come up. We happened to get some funding. And I was actually interviewing for some jobs that I actually really wanted down in Canberra at the time. The resume buffering worked. And I was lucky enough to have a really good mentor, my principal solicitor, and she fought really hard to fast track that funding to make sure I stayed. How am I looking for time? Pretty good. And I think just to sort of sum it up with falling into this position, and as much as I can say right time, right place, it's also, you know, putting the work in, putting the passion in. But I wasn't aware that EDO existed. I had to look specifically for it, for those opportunities. And it was surprising that it existed in that space. And the one thing that I found while I was like, oh, EDO, environmental law, animals, trees, etc., it's actually a really wide practice area. I was doing criminal law advice. I was doing corporations law advice. So environment is actually a really wide area and can touch lots of different spaces. So I think I'll end it there.
Awesome. Thank you, Naam, for that. Next up, we have Dr. Nicole Sleeman. So Nicole's Cairns-based GP. She's studying in Adelaide, and she's really all about bringing people's awareness to the links between the environment and health, and advocating for greater action in the public space to protect our environment. So hand it over to her.
Is this the place where we use the slide?
You do have slides.
Hello?
These are the slides. I'll give you that. You know how to use them. That's the next button. Hopefully that's all you need. If you need it. There you go.
Right, so hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? So I'm Nicole, as Garrett said, and I'm a GP. I don't know if this is working.
It's on. It's
Yes, can you hear me?
hold it close to your mouth.
Really close? Can you hear me now? Is that all right? So I'm a GP and I work here in Cairns. And I spend half my time doing GP work, and then the other half the time I do a lot of climate health advocacy and planetary health advocacy. And so essentially, so that's me at Rusty's Markets in the lead up to the election. We had a stall every Saturday morning at Rusty's trying to engage the public in the reality of the health impacts of climate change and support the campaign I was working on, which was the Doctors for the Environment Australia for Health's Sake's Climate Action Now campaign. And yep, so I'm an active member of Doctors for the Environment Australia. I've become increasingly involved in the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine and in the College of General Practitioners Climate and Environmental Medicine Special Interest Group. So in terms of my career and how I ended up in this space, so essentially I went straight from high school into uni to complete an undergrad in medicine. And in my early career, I was essentially just in the medical world, doing what people do when they finish medicine and doing my hospital years, tripping around a bit, and then ended up in general practice to do my training. And over the course of, mostly when I went into general practice, I was also at that time living in Sydney, which is where I grew up. And I was living near the ocean and swimming a lot in the ocean and becoming increasingly aware of single-use plastic and yeah, how disastrous it is essentially in the oceans. And I was quite distressed by it. And so I was kind of living in these two worlds. I was going to work, doing the GP thing. And then outside of work, I was pretty obsessed about trying to reduce my plastic use and getting more aware of the campaigns that were out there. I remember one of the first actions I took was I dumped my bank. I was a member of, I used CommBank as my bank, and the AYCC had a big campaign to dump your bank to a financial institution that wasn't investing so heavily in fossil fuels. And I did that, and I was on Facebook and following all the AYCC stuff and Get Up and just getting more educated on things. And so yep, I remember I was kind of getting towards the end of my GP training and feeling a bit distressed because I wanted to do something about the planet, and I was stuck in the medical world and didn't know what to do. So it was like my first career crisis of many. And I I finished my GP exams, and then I went along to a Doctors for the Environment Australia conference, and that was in 2017. And essentially from that moment, I was activated and became a climate activist pretty much straight away, because I learned that climate change is actually the biggest threat to global health of the 21st century. And so I suddenly had the perfect reason to get really active in the space, because actually it's core health business. And if we're not active in the space, then yeah, I feel like that's against the Hippocratic oath that I took when I graduated from medicine, which was first do no harm. So being active is imperative as far as I'm concerned. So that was about 6 weeks after the DEA conference, standing outside CommBank in Sydney with a couple of my colleagues and now very good friends, where we jumped on the Stop Adani campaign bandwagon pretty quickly and started holding events publicly and kind of just raising awareness of the health narrative around climate change and burning of fossil fuels. Because actually burning fossil fuels kills, I think there was a study in the US, like excess of 8 million people last year were killed directly from burning fossil fuels. So straight into climate health activism. And then since that time, I guess I've been, again, still a little bit in two worlds. So in 2018, I was involved in the Women's Environmental Leadership Australia program, which was an opportunity to come together with other women, and no other health professionals were in that particular cohort, but women working in all different areas in the environmental movement. In the lead up to the 2018 election, I was working with the Climate and Health Alliance part-time, and they were campaigning for a national strategy on climate, health and wellbeing. And that was my first introduction to election campaigning, or campaigning in general, really. And during that year, I also completed the Community Organising Fellowship with the Change Agency, which was an opportunity to get a little bit more understanding of campaigning and community organising as a career path, and how, it's a real specialty in itself. And there are some really incredible and talented campaigners out in the activist world. So I was pretty burnt after the 2018 election and took a little bit of time off environmental activism. But yeah, not for long, and was pretty soon part of a group of health professionals supporting the school strike for climate. Pretty much every opportunity there was to support some sort of initiative or get publicly active around the need to take urgent action on climate change, then I was involved. More recently, I guess after that, in between, a while after the election, I moved more into a more of a reforming role of activism, and got more engaged with the College of GPs Climate and Environmental Medicine Special Interest Group, and did some helped create some GP education around planetary health, which was a different way of, I guess, being involved and trying to raise awareness, and also got more involved in the lifestyle medicine movement, as I realised that was a way that I could bring planetary health into each consult, so that I didn't have to lead these two separate lives, which is ultimately my dream, is to be able to go and practice healthcare in a way which is also practicing planetary health. So, this was in the lead up to the election this year. So it was about probably a good 6 months of working on the Doctors for the Environment election campaign. And this involved lots of things, but trying to activate people all around the community, getting signs up in health practices, being at Rusty, so community engagement. It's on the radio a couple of times, just raising awareness. And I guess another part of my story has been saying yes to any opportunity to speak like this. When anyone asks me to speak on planetary health or climate change and health, then I'm there. My career now is changing a little bit, or I'm trying to work out how I can bridge the gap, because that's what I care about most. And so the reality is that healthcare also has a massive carbon and environmental footprint. And so this is kind of the area that I'm moving in towards a little bit now. And I guess this is just an indication of, we need to be sustainable as well, because we're part of the problem that's destroying the planet, which we rely on for human health. So I'm now studying a graduate certificate in public and environmentally sustainable healthcare, which is really interesting and great, and I love it. And yeah. Is that? like organization.
Yeah, feel free to check out any of these organizations Nicole's put up as well. Yeah, thank you again, Nicole. Before I invite up my next speaker, I realized I forgot to acknowledge the country that we're on. So we're on the land of the Gimoe, Wallabara, Yidinji, and Yirganji peoples. Do apologize for that being late, but I figure better late than never. I will invite Aaron up. Aaron also goes by Will. But yeah, he works for council, and I will let him speak about what he has.
Thank you. Right. G'day. Is that working? Volume's right? Hi, my name is Aaron McDonald. I tend to go by Will, so either of those will get my attention. I have a little unprepared because I kind of got blindsided by the PowerPoint thing at the last minute, and so I threw this together in like an hour this afternoon at work. If I have a bit of a tendency to ramble on, I'm speaking about myself. It's one of my favorite subjects. If I get a little carried away, go throw a leash on me or whatever you need to do. Although Garrett just did it, I'm going to do a little acknowledgement as well. So Cairns Regional Council acknowledges and pays respects to the traditional custodians of our region, the Jabugai, Uganji, Buluwai, Gimwe, Wallabari Yidinji, Mandingo Bay Yidinji, Gunganji, Dolabed, Malambari Yidinji, Bundabara, Wajambari Yidinji, Wanyu Majai, Mamu, and Ngajonji peoples. I hope I didn't butcher too many of those. We extend this respect to all elders past, present, and future, and all other First Peoples within our region. The reason that we go as far out as that is because those are all the different clan nations within the Cairns Regional Council local government area. So that's from like north of here, I think about shoot, what's that beach? Starts with W. Never mind. From there down to like Mirrawheeny. Wongetti, thank you. From about there down to Mirrawheeny. Alrighty. So, my career so far. Oh, did I get a clicker? I'll just use this. That's cool. Sorry. All right. I went to 2 primary schools, 2 high schools, and 3 universities. My parents moved around a little bit when I was a kid. So 3 universities because I've kind of bounced in and out of tertiary education and work for quite some time. It's going to be the lead up to the career thing is longer than the career. I've been in this role for like 12 months as of a few weeks ago. So I'm kind of new to full-time work, but I've been at this in one way or another, in some shape or form, doing environmental work for pretty much my entire life. So I did digital design for a little bit, and then I did Yolngu language and culture for a little bit in the Northern Territory. So that's the Yolngu country is where I grew up. I'm not Yolngu, I'm Caribbean, but I was interested in the thing, so I pursued it. And then later on discovered sustainability. So how I came to sustainability was I was a DJ, completely unrelated, but I was getting somewhat successful and getting gigs a lot around the country and even some internationally. So I was spending a lot of time in airplanes, flying probably 20 or so times a year. Working out to be like at my peak, probably like every second weekend I would be flying somewhere to perform. And at some point I found out, I had it explained to me just how bad air travel was. And I sort of couldn't justify doing that anymore, calling myself an environmentalist and kind of going around preaching about recycling and whatever else, while I fly to all corners of the globe. So I decided to learn a bit about climate change and work out what I could do to help rather than to be part of the problem, right? So came to JCU to study. It was one of only 2 universities delivering some kind of sustainability thing at the time. And I grew up, spent a lot of my younger years in Cairns, so I decided to come back here. I'm technically still a student here. I haven't graduated yet. I'm like 8 years running on an undergrad. Like I've deferred a bunch. I've done part-time study, and I'll get there one day, God willing. Ask Colin McGregor, or rather don't. I'm like his worst nightmare. I'm so old of a student that I'm still enrolled in the Bachelor of Sustainability, which doesn't exist anymore. It stopped existing like 4 years ago or something. Okay, so during that time, though, since I've been back in Cairns for about 8 or 9 years now, I've done a lot of volunteering work, a lot of activism work. I got involved in politics. All of these things, event promotion, a lot of these things, well, all of these things, I try to use them to leverage off each other and to try to create positive social change and positive environmental impacts. So each of these things has a part to play. I do event management to try and promote cultural change. I do politics because those are the big levers of power. And I try to do all of these things and I'm on the ground level in local government now, working in sustainability at the local level, which I also find really fulfilling. Where else are we? Oh, completely ignored my PowerPoint, my bad. I was a hypocrite. Kind of missed my mark there. So I applied for a job at Cairns Regional Council. Another friend of mine was working in the role. She moved on to a different role for a 1 year period, and so her job became available. I applied based on, one of the requirements was to have a degree, right? But like based on all of the other things that I've done in this time, event management was a big part of what they were looking for, because part of the role that I do is running the Eco Fiesta event, if you're familiar with that. And so I've got a lot of experience running similar kinds of events. So that sort of like played really well. Having a lot of experience and a lot of, like a volunteering experience and a lot of networking through town and stuff sort of really helped me to get the position. So it was 1 year contract. I have just been renewed for another full year, or for another 11 months or whatever. I like to think it's because I made myself indispensable. It's probably more just the timing of things. The Cairns Regional Council just endorsed our climate change strategy for 2030. So like how we're committing to net zero over the next sort of 8 years or so. So there's a lot of work in this space at the moment, which is probably more why they've kept me in the role. So one of the things Garrett asked us to mention was talk about how we deal with, how we approach meeting goals. So project management, it's super important. It comes in handy in like damn near everything. If you have a subject available, the project management subject, it's worth looking into. Otherwise, there's things online that you can do, but it's really helpful to work out how to create goals and time management, and work on dependencies and stuff to try and make your goals achievable. Which brings me to SMART. If you haven't heard of this, write it down. So goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. It's really helpful just to keep this in mind. It's super simple. It's like 101 stuff that you'll get in every like gammon corporate seminar, but it is super useful. And take notes. I have a terrible memory. I'm a compulsive note taker as a counterbalance to that. Get a to-do app. You can set time, set reminders and all the rest of that stuff. It helps me to keep my life on track. So why the environment? Why did I get sucked into this sector? Does anybody know where this is? What was that? Yeah, well done. This is one of the little rock pools at Mossman Gorge. I didn't take this photo, I'm not that good, but I was here just like a week or so ago, mourning the Queen's passing, of course. So I was here with my brother, and he was like, this has got to be the best proof that we're living in a simulation, right? Like nothing is this perfect. If you've been here, it's a gorgeous place, and it's, I think, invaluable. So this is one of the reasons that I do the things that I do. Does anyone know where this is? Or is anyone familiar with this photo? How about now? This was one of the oil spills out in, I think it was the Gulf of Mexico, is it? Yeah. So yeah, the ocean was on fire, and it was lit up, and it looked like the Eye of Sauron, you know. And I think this is the other half of why I do what I do. I think things like this are completely unacceptable, basically, and so are the accountability measures that we have in place to deal with when things like this happen. So, hence the politics and so on. That's about it. Contact details there. If you need to ask me about anything or whatever after the fact, happy to take emails and phone calls.
Yeah, and I see you've got questions up there, but we'll do that at the end. So yeah, thank you, Aaron. Is this your phone, by the way? Yeah. And then next up, we've got Irene. So Irene is the chair of Circular Economy F&Q. Very accomplished. She's from a marketing background, and her passion is zero waste. So coming up, Irene. Yeah, you don't have any.
No, I don't have any.
You will have to stand here just for the camera.
Okay,
So that's
okay.
why, yeah, and then you don't need this.
Great. Hello. My career is a lot longer than everybody else's because I'm the matriarch in the room. In my teens, I'm a child of a serial entrepreneur, so I learned about business at 14 because my role was to do one set of books for the accountant and one set of books for the family. So I learned that kind of business strategy very early. So I wasn't really suited to school. I was a little bit, I liked history and English, but everything else was based on, I wasn't interested in the topic, so I didn't pay attention. But I was really good at bossing people around. So I became a manager of the fruit and veg stall in Innisfail. And my first job had me managing 7 people at 17. And I kind of kept on getting management roles. And I think in my 20s, it was more about, I ran raves in London. I didn't want to work for somebody. I was trying to find a way that I could create a business for myself. So I kind of was a little bit loosey-goosey in my 20s, studied medicine. So I studied acupuncture for 7 years because I was going to do that. Then my son was born with a rare eye condition. So there was no strategy for that. So because I'd studied acupuncture, I went, okay, I have one client and that's it. It was my son. So then I was like, okay, I cannot just be a mum. It'll drive me nuts. So Yoga and Daily Life brought out a magazine. And I rang them and said, what are people asking about? And they said, yoga clothing. And I went, I've done yoga for 10 years. I can do that. And I had a girlfriend who was a fashion designer. So I got a $10,000 overdraft and ran that business for 11 years until ASOS and e-commerce and international shipping became mainstream. And selling a $69 Australian-made skirt was really hard when you could buy a $39 one. That was, more fast fashion. So in my 30s, I did a sustainable label because in my 20s at 23, I read an article that Nestle had shipped milk powder to Africa that actually killed babies. And they were persuading African women, tribal women, not to breastfeed, but to buy Nestle milk powder. And that was in 95. So I protested and stopped buying any mainstream products. I became a zero waste minimalist. I lived out of my backpack for 7 years, but I thought this isn't making an impact if I'm just doing it me. So after that period, I moved to Brisbane to study with an acupuncturist so I could become a really good acupuncturist. And while I was there, I found it really hard to be sustainable, but I did find my ways to doing it. So how I became sustainable was I just focused on my family. How could I have zero waste, zero plastic? I ate organic from the time I was 23, which is really expensive. So I kind of really got into nutrition and food as medicine. None of my children have actually ever been to a doctor because they've never needed to, because I fed them on home cooked meals, used food as medicine all the way through. So what I noticed when I was at markets selling sustainable clothing was that I needed to get more proficient at online. So in 2001, my husband built me a website and then he gave it to me to manage. And in 1999, I was using a computer as a glorified typewriter. You know what I mean? I was just using it for Word docs while I was studying acupuncture. Anyway, over those 20 years, I actually ended up doing a degree in internet communications, and then I ended up doing all these side courses. Google Plus was out. I read a really good book. I could talk to the author. He walked me through all these strategies, and I ended up moving from selling sustainable fashion because nobody was listening to me. It was a bit early. Nobody wanted to buy. Nobody could understand the difference between natural fibers and synthetic, and it was too hard to kind of educate people that way without a marketing degree. So I went and did internet communications, and I learned all about online because I liked the collective intelligence element of it, and the sense of community that was on there, because everyone's really generous. You know, Creative Commons is an awesome framework, and the generosity just in online was just, I knew that was my people, and I had to, even though, oh my God, there was one term I actually cried my way through the subject of having to custom build a website from, like, do HTML5, and you couldn't copy and paste it. You actually had to write this code. Anyway, that is not my brain. I have a creative brain and a business brain. Anyway, YouTube helped with learning. So once I could get visual learning, my online learning just catapulted. So I ended up running an agency because I could earn more money doing people's SEO than selling natural fiber clothing at a market that was slowly becoming a harder sell because of the fast fashion movement that had actually really started to grow in Australia from 2008. And then as I went through this, I had this moral dilemma because I was like, I don't want to sell shit because it leads to, you know, landfill. So I studied with Seth Godin. I've just about done all of his inbound marketing strategy. And I always worked with the hard customers, like you're either a lead gen website or you sold something that lasted 10 to 15 years. So that's how I could, you know, sit with that morally. But it's given me every single bit of skill I need to do now, like I need now for the circular economy, because what we're building is a data model that will actually allow me to visualize data from a supply chain point when it comes to food and waste, and how we can make a circular flow economy from food waste. So 2 years ago, I found this awesome coach who taught data modeling, and I took to it like a duck to water. I really freaking love JavaScript and all that kind of online weird. I don't know how my brain really, but I love it. Anyway, so now I use data to consult my clients on how to reduce waste. And also you can actually use data to help fashion labels produce less waste. So it's really a smart strategy for me to be able to leverage what I'm doing, talk about reducing waste in a way that's like a business model, answers to their profit and loss, whilst also saving the planet at the same time, even if they're not ethically minded that way. So this is because I was a bang on hippie, you know, and I realized people don't want it in their face. They want it side by side, and they want to know that it's going to fit into their life without changing their life too much. And so over the 27 years of coming from, I'm not supporting big companies anymore, and I'm only supporting small businesses, to where I am now, is that I can work with 7, 8, 10-figure businesses and slip in that, you know, hey, if we did this, we could produce less, then you'd have less stock in your inventory. And you know what I mean? It actually makes the business more profitable. So it doesn't sound like I'm doing sustainability, but I am, because if we can reduce waste in the production line, it actually reduces waste. And you don't have that sale kind of psychology in fashion or other products. So now what I'm doing with the circular economy is I'm building a data model that hopefully will test a solution for food waste, and that we can actually license and distribute to other councils and regions in a regional setting, but also in suburbs and a city as well. So data has gotten me into some really exciting rooms. Like people have, like, I've managed to get a $600,000 pilot with CRC-fied food waste and DAF, and they want to leapfrog some modelling that they've already got and take it to the next level by bringing the diversion of food waste and tourism into the bottom part of the pipeline to supply what we're doing in a commercial composting place, and hopefully make compost available in Cairns that doesn't come in a plastic bag. Anyway, I had no structure. I zigzagged. I followed what made me interested. You know, I found good coaches. Oh my God, a good coach can leapfrog your career by years. So I studied with this data coach, and I got up at 3 a.m. for a year to consume, you know, be in his live training. And in the second year, I actually signed a social media client. So goes to show, get a good coach and it'll elevate your career.
Cool.
Okay, I think that's everything. Data's cool. Data is really cool.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. And of course, if you missed anything, what we're now going to do is I'm going to invite all the panelists up. So Irene, I'll get you to come right back along with everyone else. Take a seat there. Any chair you like. Ashley, can you try and make it just or display our club logo without transitioning around? Yeah. See how you. Now, hopefully we'll be able to delve more into what you all talked about in your openings. So we'll just spend about a minute on each of these questions that are really designed to draw a bit more. Give it that. So the first thing I want to hear about is just like you get into better. So tell me, what's the most rewarding about your career? Why that's rewarding?
Okay, I guess I'll start. The most rewarding thing about my career would be helping people, because, like, as I sort of touched on earlier, the places people live in is really, really important to people, whether it's through family history, sometimes it's, you know, generations. There was one particular client I had who was a farmer a little bit down south. His family had been on that property for nearly a century. And he came to me about this environmental issue that had been happening, that he'd been getting the cold shoulder from people, that had been going on since environmental vandalism back in the 60s. And our office was the first people to actually listen to him and hear about his problem and say, well, this is what we can do to help. This is a pathway we can find to help you through this. And he was just so grateful that I finally have someone listen to him, that finally have someone feel that concern and listen to his concerns and help him. And it was very emotional for him, because it was an emotional problem, a generational trauma that had existed through his family. For, like, his father had problems with this, his grandfather had problems with this. And so being able to, like, deal with some systemic issues and help people in my own community about something that was really important and present to them. And I found, like, that was probably the highlight of my career, even though it ended up being a very small matter. You know, it didn't make the papers, no headlines, you know, wasn't saving the Great Barrier Reef or anything like that. Just a little creek down someone's farm. But it held such importance to that person, really made it a highlight of my career to be able to help them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, using laws to really make a difference. Yeah. And Nicole, for you, what's been most rewarding about you?
So I'm going to say what's been most rewarding around my like moving into the more planetary health sphere of my career. And ultimately, I guess there's two things. The first thing is that what became apparent when I went to that DEA conference back in 2017, and since that day I realized that there was an opportunity, having, you know, had this health degree and obviously having a job which is very tangible, that I was able to start bringing in my deepest held values into my work. And because that was a conflict for so long for me, and so the most rewarding thing when I'm doing anything in the planetary health realm, whether it's, educating or, studying something or campaigning, it's that I'm living out my deepest values, which is around earth care. And raising awareness and consciousness of our connection, our innate connection to the earth, and just being one part of her systems. And then the other part, which has been so rewarding, is that when I started to engage in the climate health and planetary health movement, is I started connecting with people who actually had the same deep core values and the same altruistic drives, and were also pursuing, environmental justice and human health. And so, yeah, I've now, it's so rewarding to, even in the face of what sometimes feels like banging my head on a brick wall, in the face of all of that, to be connecting with colleagues and, now very good friends who inspire me consistently, and be working towards something greater alongside them, and to feel understood and to understand their passions, and also, the tragedy of so many things, and then the wins as well. It's, yeah, that's probably the most rewarding thing.
Same question.
Yeah. And for this section, let's just leave the other class to the actions.
In my short career, in the last 12 months, I've got like a bunch of highlights that I'm really stoked about. Like I've got to do, use the council's nursery resources and hook the council up with the Irukandji Rangers to do re-veg work on their sacred country. There's a bunch of things like that I've found, small things that have that mean a lot to. It's kind of like what Naeem was saying, like sometimes these small things that people care a lot about, and you get to be a part of. So I get to sort of facilitate other people to do the sustainability project that they're trying to do. We get to give grant money to needy organizations to put solar on their roof to make their business sustainable, like if to make they're not-for-profit sustainable sort of, and I mean like not just environmentally sustainable, but to make their operations actually achievable for them, help them with their finances and stuff. But the sort of tie for first that I've got from so far is the Eco Fiesta. Obviously, it's so much fun. It's I love event delivery anyway, and putting on my favorite musicians and a bunch of super interesting workshops and all those sorts of things are really fun anyway. And the other thing is the climate change strategy, like council committing to going to net zero by 2030 and to sourcing all of their power from renewable sources. Like these sorts of things are really important, and and Cairns is not at the forefront on these sorts of things, but definitely towards the front and getting closer. So those are the two big highlights for me.
Yeah, and because you mentioned Eco Fiesta, who's been to Eco Fiesta here? Yeah, pretty good show. Irene.
God, I think I'm just at the beginning. I think the highlights are going to be next year, but I love seeing the change in people's faces when you show them how they could be part of the solution. That probably to me is the most addictive part of it. I did a wedding on the weekend where we managed the waste on it, and there was a 10-year-old child with a little clipper going through and decontaminating the bins with me. His mind was blown. He was like, I was opening up one bin, and he actually came over with the clipper and said he'd been picking up waste all night. And then he looked at what I was doing with the bins and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm decontaminating the waste." And he was like, "Oh my God, can I do that?" Hour and a half later, I didn't even have to do any work. I went and sat in the, the wedding part, in the crowd, and just watched him. And to see this kid just run around the wedding and just have such a ball. And the next day, 20 adults came up to me and goes, "Did you see that kid? Blah, blah, blah." And I was like, oh my God, that's like the best thing. Like seeing change, behavioral change in action is always going to be the highlight of my career. I just hope I'm making it bigger and bigger, and to a point where I don't need to be there anymore. It's just mass adoption. For me, that's where I think that would be the highlight of my career, where what I set up as a template to teach people on how to be part of the solution, and that gets adoption. That's what I'm working on at the moment, to try and figure that out and deliver that in a really easy to adopt way. But, you know, doing the data and finding the data and using that as a leverage point, that's been probably the most exciting point to this point, where there isn't actually a roadmap on data modeling and visualizing the full supply chain carbon footprint in food, and being part of that, that's another exciting highlight that's probably going to take a few years to achieve, but, you know, long play.
Yeah, all right, and I'll get you, hold on to the mic and we'll go the other way for this next question. But yeah, thank you. And it sounds like, yeah, the best is still to come, which is great. Yeah. The next question I want to go to is advice for students in your field. So what I mean by that is who might be studying, in your case, Irene, maybe a Bachelor of Business or whatever's applicable to you. What advice would you have for students in your field who have an interest in the environment and want to make an impact?
Volunteer. Find someone who is doing something that you are interested in and volunteer, because I actually think that these programs are going to be either a runway to a job, you know, and that will give you some kind of credentials. Or like, I started my first foray into doing pro bono work was with the Thin Green Line, because they were working with rangers in South Africa. So I did that pro bono work. And now what I'm doing with the circular economy, this is actually the roadmap of what I'm doing to actually pivot myself from just being data, but being a strategist in the circular transition that's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years. So I'm volunteering, and in that, as I'm volunteering, I'm learning things that can actually design my next step in my career. So yeah, help someone.
Volunteering, yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so Irene stole my answer. I think she was looking over my shoulder when I had my phone out before. Basically that. I'm just going to add to what Irene said, which is volunteering. Just get involved in organizations that are doing the things that you care about, or that are doing the kind of involved in the sort of sector you want to get into. It's all about networking for one thing, and it's about showing people your skill set and showing people that you're willing to learn and that you're interested and that you're keen. People get to know you and what you're about. And I mean, that definitely worked for me. Like, I haven't finished my degree yet. I mentioned I'm still a student, but I managed to get my job as an officer at the sustainability officer at the council off the back of running music festivals. Essentially, like I did a lot of work in running political campaigns and running music events, and that gave me the skill set, or at least part of the skill set. The other part was obviously a sustainability education, but those two things together got me over the line for a job that had an undergrad as its as a prerequisite. So having those networks established by just throw yourself into whatever you care about and you'll meet the right people. And, you know, half the jobs that are out there don't get advertised. You know, you just gotta be out there and keen.
Oh.
I guess number 3, volunteering. And then, but also I think it's really important to be able to understand, because if we're going to survive as a species, we really need to have a real, like our way of understanding and perceiving the world needs to be ecological. And so everything we do needs to count, you know, it needs to reflect nature's processes and be in balance. So I would say that no matter what you're studying, like explore the way that it's part of the solution in living kind of a regenerative future. Because I think, you know, I used to think that human health was separate. And then I came to understand that actually it's intimately related to the health of the ecosystems that we're within. So I think that it's really important that we start to not just have like work, and then if you're, you know, labeled a hippie, then you go and do your green thing after work. Like, this needs to be the way that we live in the world and we move and we work in the world. So my encouragement is to like live out your care for the earth in everything you do, and carve your career, like bring it into your work. It shouldn't be separate.
Yeah, really combining those two. I like that.
All right, well, it's going to be 4 for 4 for volunteering. I know I personally, with JCU's work experience program, I take students every semester. If anyone puts their hand up, this semester I didn't get anyone. So if there's any law students in the room, sign up, you'll have a place. You'll get a 1 day a week with me for 8 weeks. Great mentorship, just to ring my own bell. But also it's about networking as well. Like, you're being here is a great start, surrounding yourself with people who are in the movement, with people who like living out that lifestyle. Because like Will said, a lot of these jobs aren't advertised. A lot of these roles are popping up spontaneously as people realize they need them. So being in that space is like the first step, because if people know you, if people are aware that you're developing that skill set, especially if it's an emerging role, people take a chance on you. If you've got a mentor, like whether it's a student through me or whether it's a professor or a lecturer that you really like, or someone in a local sports club, if you have a mentor, if you've got someone who will also actively take an interest in you and help you through that pathways of like being able to identify, because it's really hard to network as a student and as a young person. But if you've got someone whose networks you can use as well, dramatically increases your networks. So like, find someone who's older, find someone who's in that space and engage with them, get in contact. Because I know a lot of people who are in this space are very passionate about it, and we love it when other people want to be involved, when, you know, other people want to enter this space, because we're all about, you know, spreading this lifestyle, spreading this sustainability. So like, please reach out to people, reach out to us. Oh, I don't want to like throw their hands up, but, you know, reach out to the people in the space, because, you know, they want to engage.
Yeah, and I think just to echo that, that's an excellent. Definitely stay and mingle, chat to these guys after. You never know what opportunities could come up. Next thing I want to do, I had a different question, but I'm going to improvise a bit because I know not everyone in the room is a student. I guess my question is, well, part of the theme for tonight is multidisciplinariness. I've brought together people who aren't typically thought of as being in the environmental field. So what do you think we need to do? What do you think scientists and environmentalists need to do more with the people in your field to better have an impact? Where do you think there are opportunities and that kind of thing? And not to put too much pressure, but we will keep it to about 30 seconds to a minute. But yeah, think about that. Does anyone? Yeah, Irene? Yeah.
Talk to your market. When you're designing something or a solution, talk to your market. Because I have seen some great examples of, look at this, the need, but who does it serve? You know, and scientists and engineers are definitely a key part of the solution moving forward. But first, before you come up with this idea, go and talk to your market, see what they want, then design it. Because I think, and it happens in the business world as well. Like, people go, oh my God, I got a great business idea, I'm going to spend all this money developing it, and then it just flops. Same theory. Talk to your market first, find out what their problems are, design the solution. Engineering is a huge part, and science are a huge part of the transition to a more circular lifestyle. That's probably my key advice.
So just to clarify the question, it was, what can scientists do to impact my field, my sector?
Yeah, and I mean, for yourself, and I suppose you're more within that traditional sustainability field. But yeah, where do you think there are opportunities for greater collaboration outside that kind of narrow environmental greenie realm? And I mean, you know, you have some experience with events and
Sure,
that
yeah.
type of thing, so.
I mean, like, aside from just generally throwing yourself into whatever it becomes available, like, it's about being creative, I guess, and keeping your eyes open for opportunities that present themselves. I think there's a big gap, or maybe gap's not the right word, but I think there's a lot of work to be done in science communication. There's a lot of misinformation due to social media and whatever else, and it's made I think it's sent a lot of things down an awkward path that would be avoidable if people had more faith in our institutions. So that goes for media, science, politics, all of those things. But I think having scientists out there being vocal about and friendly, obviously, don't go picking fights and trolling and whatnot. But having people who know what they're talking about, speaking confidently about those things, I think can help to counteract some of that misinformation that sends us down, down a bad path.
Oh. Yeah. So in your case, what might a scientist or academic, how can they, also an environmental activist even, how can they better work with health professionals to achieve environmental outcomes and health outcomes?
What's been really enlightening for me has to come to with like doing, I guess, training in activism and campaigning, and coming to understand a bit more about social change. Because I think ultimately, climate change, for example, was labelled as an environmental issue. And it really was politicized, and that's been the problem for so many years, is that it's like the Greenies will look after it, but actually climate change impacts everyone on the planet. And so I think, like, from my perspective, obviously climate change and, the destruction of ecological systems is a human health issue because it impacts all of our health. But ultimately the solution is around social change. And I think social change requires all different skill sets, including scientists. But if we silo climate change or sustainability in the science realm, we're not thinking about social science or change. Do you know what I mean? Or we're not thinking about, one of the things which has been really nice about working in the health field is that I can speak to all different people of any sort of political leaning, because I come from a balanced, it's about health, it's not about who you vote for. And so I think we need to all step back and say, how do societies make large scale change in short periods of time? And that doesn't necessarily mean putting out more PhDs or, scientific papers. It actually requires, how do we raise consciousness and how do we all work together across sectors? So I think really getting out of our silos and thinking about social change as a thing is really important.
Yeah, for sure.
So just also touching up on that a little bit, with taking a multidisciplinary approach, it's like plain communication, but also it's not just like plain communication. I think people, scientists, researchers are doing really well and getting really good at plain communication now. But the decision makers don't tend to make decisions off plain communication. You need to not just be able to communicate your message plainly, but also within that field. So we can talk about climate change as to what it's going to do to the environment, what 1.5 degrees means. But unless we're using the language of risk, if we convert that to what is that risk, what is that economic value, suddenly other people are taking attention. That's language, that's data, it's transforming that data into a way that other disciplines can use. So while the environments might be able to say, well, this is what it means to our species, but if the species go, if that ecosystem goes, what does that mean to our economy? What does that mean to our other systems that we use? So being able to link, break that silo, but also convert the data. It's about how else can we use that data that you're generating and apply it in other fields. And it is hard when you're in that silo to know, well, what does that do? But people, there are researchers in other areas, and I know a lot of that research is happening. I've talked to economists myself, but it's trying to understand and frame your message in a way to a target audience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it kind of ties in nicely to Irene's as well about, knowing your market. Well, thank you all, and we'll give the panel a round of applause for that. So what we'll do now is we've got time for one or two audience questions, if anyone would like. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question to the panel? Yep, Holly.
I've got a quiet voice too. I'm Holly. I'm the Sustainability Officer here at JCU. I've also only been in the role for 12 months, like Aaron. And I've enjoyed working closely with the City Council over the last 12 months. One of our issues at JCU is trying to engage our staff and our students in just small changes, just little things like using a reusable cup or trying to recycle. What's your advice to me on engagement with students? I'm so interested to see Doctors for the Environment used to be an active group at JCU. Do I do special things for doctor groups, for lawyer groups, for business groups? Or is there like a universal way of engaging people that you can recommend?
Excellent question. Thank you. Does anyone want to? Yep, Pam.
I was a student 3 years ago, and Will's a student now still. I think really you should just be asking your students. That's honestly the best answer I could give you, is ask the people that you want to be communicating with. I know you've got great student groups who are not just engaged in this space, but engaged generally, whether it's the student union, whether it's the football clubs. Just ask them to say, well, what are you using and what do you need to change? Because often it's like, I know trying to run a student club, we're struggling sometimes getting members, we're struggling with funding. That we need to be enabled. Your students need to be enabled to make the change. And so that's really the question that you should be asking your students is, how can I enable this change? Not what do I have to do to make you change? It needs to come from enabling perspective. And that's with most groups from my experience, is coming from an enabling framework is always going to get much better results than trying to dictate a change.
Really good question. I feel like that all the time. I'm always thinking about that. I think I guess the conclusions that I'm at this point in time are that, number one, I think like it makes a difference when policies are in place, because sometimes you just actually need people to not have the choice and to follow suit. So I think working up the top is really important, and advocating for policy change, like environmental policies or waste policies on campus, things like that. And then I think the other side is the bottom up approach, which is kind of around enabling, which is how do you support people who are passionate? Because there are lots of capable leaders everywhere, and really we want to build leaders everywhere because we need to make such huge changes. So being able to provide conditions where those leaders can step up and then support them to go ahead, I think that's a really important thing. And then the third thing is that I think if you want to make something matter to someone, then you need to make it relevant to them, which might be a bit hard in this space, but certainly in the health space, if I see someone, if I've got a patient who has a plastic water bottle, like a single-use plastic water bottle or cup, which I feel quite distressed by when they bring into a consult. And so, I always mention about the oceans, but I also say like, hey, do you know that you're drinking microbeads? And this is how it's impacting your health. Because I know that health matters to them, or they wouldn't be sitting in front of me. And so it's also good to think about, okay, what does this person value, and how is it going to impact them by continuing this behavior, or how is doing something different going to benefit them and align with their values?
That's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? And if you ever figure out how to crack that nut, come and tell me as well. It's hard to give a generic answer to a question like that, because the solutions generally need to be tailored to whatever the context is that you're trying to, what's your message? Like, what behavior change is so hard just anyway, it's a huge part of what I do at council is trying to, promote behavior change and that sort of thing as well. And it's really, really hard. And there's no one size fits all. Like what works for one group of people may or may not work for another group. It's really context dependent, but maybe a small a general rule that's fairly widely applicable is like has to be low input and fun would be the ideal approach. Outside of that, what Nick said about having the top-down approach is pretty good. I remember like that's ultimately the gold standard, I think, like depending on what we're doing, obviously. But when the laws changed, like it started, whatever it was, 10 years ago, or whatever, the green bags thing started at Woolies and Coles. And, the 5 or 10% of environmentalists would bring their green bags in every time, and they'd, dutifully forego the plastic bags, and then they would bring their own and whatever else. And then when the laws changed, everybody cracked it and kicked up a huge fuss about it, and everyone was pissing and moaning for weeks, right? And then after about 2 weeks, everyone just got used to it and got on with it, right? It was like a minimal imposition, a minor inconvenience on their life, and then they just went on with it. So like, I think that like if you can't do the making a rule from up on high thing, which isn't always applicable, then you have to make it fun and approachable and not too much of an imposition on people, or they just won't take it up. Would be my advice, I guess.
There's a great book by Les Robinson called Changeology. Have you read it? Start there. Like the first thing he talks about is creating a buzz, right? And that's what I've been doing with the circular economy for the past 15 months. It's just banging on about what we're doing, right? And then it comes down to making them feel like it was their idea in the first place is another step, right? You need to introduce one small change at a time. Like for me, he said just to get people to add an extra bin to the kitchen, because it's been statistically proven that once people add one extra bin, they start looking at other bins that they can add. So you might think that you have to make this humongous change, but it's just asking them to take one small step, right? And there's a really good app called One Small Step that people can actually self-manage, going through changing everything from their bank to their super to their, it's a fantastic app, really good one. So talk about the apps. There's Share Waste, getting people, if they don't want to bring their compost to JCU, register on that app. So if someone in their street is taking their food waste, they can do that. One small step. Then recommending the Recycle Mate, which is if people don't know which bin to put it in, use that app. Start talking about the apps. It's really easy, very simple. And then talk about why they should use that app. The more data that Recycle Mate gets, the more they're going to see what are the different types of waste, where are people stuck. It's data, data, data. And, I actually think there's something we can do with our pilot to kind of network in what you're doing here to actually get the science students and the environmental students to kind of get interested in the biotech solution that we're doing in our pilot, that could possibly have the students here go, oh my God, this is a career. Like this, I could actually talk about soil health for the rest of my life and be happy. And all they need to do is, see a commercial composting solution in action, like it's like there are tangible learners. And if you show them that they can actually do, part of what you're showing them in the garden, to be part of their environmental science, to be part of their engineering, because we're going to need engineering, because waste is heavy to move. Food waste is heavy, really heavy. It's the heaviest waste to move. So, there's give them a problem, let them be part of the solution. So I actually think you and I, from another mister for the next 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
That might be your answer.
Hopefully that answers your question, Holly. And yeah, thank you. All really good contributions. And I think, like you said, Irene, really making it exciting, and also the top, up, and down approaches that we've discussed, Nicole and Nahum, particularly, like we need that policy change, I think, but also really do need, people at grassroots involved. So I think that's about all we've got time for. I'll ask everyone to give another round of applause.